Matthew and Gina's shared love for marine life started when they were kids exploring their hometown beaches. They spent hours wading in the waves, chasing after starfish, crabs, and dreaming of the underwater world. As they grew older, their passion for the ocean deepened and they turned their hobby into a profession. Together, they created a YouTube channel dedicated to wildlife documentaries, specializing in sharks. Their unique videos showcased the lives of these creatures and dispelled many of the myths and misconceptions that surrounded them. They braved dangerous waters and weather to capture stunning footage that left viewers spellbound. Behind the camera, Matthew and Gina were not only colleagues, but also lifelong best friends, with a deep respect for the ocean and its inhabitants. That's why when their YouTube channel hit 1 million subscribers, Matthew and Gina were over the moon. They had come a long way since starting their wildlife documentaries together and wanted to celebrate with their loyal viewers. To show their gratitude, they decided to let their followers choose the topic for their next documentary. They set up a poll and asked viewers to vote for the wildlife they wanted to see next. The poll results were in, and the winner was the bull sharks of the Zambezi River in Mozambique. The duo packed their bags and headed to Mozambique, where they met up with their local guide, who would take them to the best spots to film the bull sharks. They spent several days on the river, getting up early in the morning to catch the sharks feeding, and staying out late at night to capture their nocturnal habits. The 3 days of the shoot had been nothing short of amazing. Matthew and Gina had captured some incredible footage of the bull sharks in the Zambezi River, showcasing their strength, speed, and grace. But there was something that had been nagging at Matthew ever since they arrived. Despite bull sharks being known to be solitary hunters, many of the sharks they observed were hunting in groups, coordinating their attacks, and sharing their prey. This was an unusual phenomenon, and Matthew couldn't help but wonder why this was happening. As he pondered this mystery, Gina simply shrugged it off, saying that it was just a coincidence. But Matthew knew there was more to it than that. He could sense it in the way the sharks moved, the way they communicated with each other, and the way they worked together to take down their prey. On the 4th day of their expedition along the river, while Gina and Matthew were busy filming at the mouth of the river, Gina's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a bull shark going about its hunting routine, unperturbed by their presence. Gina signaled Matthew to join her in getting a better shot of the magnificent creature, but he urged her to leave the shark alone and exit the water. Gina, entranced by the shark's sleek movements, ignored his warnings and persisted in tracking the predator, unaware of the lurking danger nearby. Only when it was too late did she realize she had become the target of another apex predator. Dread washed over Gina as she faced a colossal 13-foot bull shark with lifeless eyes, realizing she was the hunted, not the hunter. Time stood still as she grappled with shock, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to make sense of the situation. With lightning speed, the bull shark lunged at Gina, sinking its teeth into her neck. The sheer force of the attack was overwhelming, and Gina felt the crunch of bones as the shark's serrated teeth tore through her flesh. Blood gushed out of her carotid arteries, staining the once murky waters a horrifying shade of crimson red. Gina's body went into shock as she desperately tried to fend off the relentless predator, but her strength faded quickly. The pain in her grievous wound was unbearable, and the shark's thrashing only worsened the damage. Gina could feel her life draining away, her vision growing hazy as the world around her blurred into darkness. It was a harrowing and tragic end to what was supposed to be an ordinary day of filming. Matthew stood frozen in terror as he watched the horrific scene unfold before him. He couldn't move, couldn't bring himself to intervene as the bull shark continued to maul his best friend Gina to death. The sight was gut-wrenching, and Matthew felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. But the horror didn't end there. To Matthew's horror, he saw other bull sharks converging on the gruesome scene. They were drawn by the scent of blood in the water, and they were closing in fast. Matthew realized with a sinking feeling that Gina's brutal fate was not over yet. One particularly large bull shark measured around 10 feet in length, charged towards Gina and bit her leg clean off her body. The shark swiftly grabbed its prize and disappeared into the depths of the water, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The other bull sharks wasted no time in joining the feeding frenzy. They tore into Gina's lifeless, mangled body, ripping off her arms, legs, and head with vicious ferocity. The water turned a sickening shade of red as Gina's blood mixed with the surrounding currents. Matthew could hardly believe what he was witnessing. Within moments, nothing was left of Gina. Her body had been reduced to a gory mess, devoured by the hungry bull sharks. Once Matthew realized that his friend Gina was gone, he snapped out of his shock and realized that he needed to get out of the water before he became the next target. His body was filled with adrenaline and fear as he swam fast as he could, his arms and legs pumping furiously through the water. He had never swum so fast in his life. He pushed himself to the brink as he felt his muscles burning while swimming. Looking back, he saw a fin approaching, and he swam even faster, gritting his teeth to reach the shore. Collapsing onto the sand, he cried uncontrollably. This woman, his best friend, was ripped apart by a pack of bull sharks, and he couldn't do anything to save her. Matthew survived the ordeal, but the emotional and psychological trauma of that incident will stay with him for the rest of his life. The waves relentlessly pounded the shoreline of the secluded Caribbean beach, producing a rhythmic melody that seemed to call out to the young travelers. The sun's waning light cast a shimmering golden hue across the ocean's horizon, illuminating the restless waves as they crashed against the shore. The travelers had been warned of the bull sharks that swam in these waters, but they paid no heed to the rumors. They were fearless and driven by the promise of an adventure that would be etched in their memories forever. The thrill of the unknown was a siren's call, luring them towards the ocean's edge. Their hearts pounded excitedly, and nothing could deter them from pursuing excitement and danger. Within the group's adventurers, there was a young woman named Emily. Her carefree and impulsive nature made her a favorite among the group. Emily lived for the thrill of the moment and was always eager to show off her bravery. She embodied risk-taking, often going to great lengths to impress her friends. As the group set up camp, Emily's thoughts immediately turned to the vast expanse of the ocean, and she felt an irresistible urge to dive in. The anticipation of the unknown filled Emily's heart as she made her way to the water's edge. The cool Caribbean breeze played with her hair, and the salty scent of the ocean filled her nostrils. The waves gently lapped at her toes, beckoning her to dive into their depths. Emily's heart raced excitedly as she took her first steps into the ocean. The warm water engulfing her body was exhilarating, and she felt truly alive. Emily's heart raced as she swam further out to the ocean. She felt invincible, as if nothing could stop her. But as she gazed down into the depths below, she noticed a group of dark shadows gliding gracefully through the water. The shape of their fins and the cold, dead eyes staring back at her made her heart beat. It took a moment for her to realize what they were, but as they drew closer, she knew the truth. Bull sharks. The rumors she had heard about these deadly predators came flooding back to her, but instead of fear, Emily felt a sense of fascination. She had never seen a bull shark before, and the adrenaline rush of the moment drove her closer to the pack. The glint of their razor-sharp teeth was mesmerizing, and she couldn't resist the urge to get closer. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for her phone, the desire to capture the perfect shot taking over her. With the bull sharks swimming so close, it would be the perfect opportunity to impress her friends with a breathtaking picture. She tried to steady her breathing, careful not to startle the sharks, as she extended her arm to take the photo. But little did she know that she was putting herself in grave danger. Emily's body went rigid as the shark suddenly lunged towards her. She could feel the force of the water as the predator rapidly closed in, its jaws agape and revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Panic surged through Emily's veins, and she held her breath, not daring to move. Emily's fascination quickly turned to terror as the bull shark circled around her. She could see every detail of its body, the rough, gray skin, the powerful tail propelling it forward, the rows of teeth waiting to tear her apart. Despite her fear, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of wonder at the creature's beauty. But that feeling quickly dissipated as she realized the danger she was in. Emily's heart raced as the bull shark pack closed on her. She could feel their hot breath on her skin and smell the metallic scent of blood and sea salt. Their dark, unblinking eyes locked on hers, and she knew she was in trouble. She kicked her legs frantically, trying to swim away, but the sharks were too fast. They circled around her, their fins cutting through the water rapidly. Emily's mind raced as she struggled to devise a plan, but her thoughts were jumbled and panicked. She could feel the water churn around her as the sharks closed in for the kill. As Emily struggled to escape the impending attack, her screams echoed across the deserted beach. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her lungs burned as she gasped for air. The sharks had clamped onto her limbs, pulling her down with each passing moment. Emily could feel the rough texture of their skin against her skin, and the searing pain of their teeth sinking into her flesh. The salt water stung her eyes, making it difficult to see as she fought for her life. As the sharks pulled her deeper into the ocean, Emily realized the gravity of the situation. She was surrounded by these relentless predators, and no one was around to save her. Her friends on the shore heard her cries and rushed to the water's edge. They could see the sharks circling, their fins cutting through the water. They called out to Emily, but there was no response. The water turned red with blood as the sharks ripped her apart. The group was in shock. They had never seen anything like it before. They called the Coast Guard, who arrived shortly after. The sharks had disappeared into the depths, leaving behind only a trail of blood. The Coast Guard searched for hours, but could not find Emily's body. The rest of the travelers were traumatized by the incident. They had come to the Caribbean looking for adventure, but found something far more terrifying. They vowed never to take unnecessary risk again, realizing that the ocean is dangerous. Harvey and his crew had been shark hunters for years. They had seen it all: great whites, hammerheads, tiger sharks, and more. But when they got the call about a series of shark attacks in Volusia County, Florida, they knew that this was going to be their toughest assignment yet. 5 people had been injured and maimed, and 1 person was still missing. Harvey and his crew knew they had to act fast. Upon reaching the scene, they were surprised to find that many beachgoers were still present, despite the news of recent shark attacks. Harvey and his team realized that these individuals were in danger and needed protection from further harm. The team quickly got to work, implementing measures to safeguard the people on the beach. With their primary focus being the safety of the beachgoers, Harvey and his crew wasted no time in initiating their mission. They began to patrol the shoreline and the surrounding waters, scanning the area with utmost vigilance for any signs of danger. The crew was well aware of the threats posed by great whites, which were known to frequent those waters. As such, they maintained a state of high alert and exercised extreme caution. The team was equipped with the latest technology and tools to detect and track any movement in the water, allowing them to react promptly in case of any shark sightings. In the midst of their vigilant patrol, the crew was caught off guard when a colossal creature forcefully collided with their boat, jolting everyone on board. Tony, one of the seasoned crew members, was caught off balance and was inadvertently knocked overboard, plunging into the water below. As the crew frantically rushed to Tony's aid, their hearts pounded with fear and urgency. They scanned the waters for any sign of Tony's whereabouts, but before they could react, a 20-foot great white shark emerged from beneath the surface with lightning speed. With jaws wide open, the shark lunged at Tony, clamping its razor-sharp teeth onto his body. The crew's worst fears became a horrifying reality as Tony was dragged under the water by the powerful shark. The surface of the water turned crimson with blood, a stark and chilling reminder of the perilous situation. The crew's hearts pounded with fear as they watched their comrade Tony struggle in the jaws of the great white shark. Without a moment's hesitation, Harvey and the other crew members sprang into action, diving into the water and racing to Tony's rescue. The water was murky, and the shark's movements were unpredictable, making the situation all the more dangerous. As they drew closer, they could hear Tony's desperate thrashing as he fought for his life. Harvey and the crew felt a mix of emotions, fear, determination, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility to protect their friend. Adrenaline was pumping through their veins as they approached the terrifying predator. The crew's spear guns were their weapons of choice, and they wielded them with skill and precision. As they closed in on the shark, Harvey and his crew members started firing their spears with lines attached to the boat. One spear managed to latch onto the belly of the great white. But it didn't seem to be enough to stop the ferocious predator. Harvey knew that they needed to act fast and decisively to save Tony's life. With no regard for his own safety, he boldly approached the shark, brandishing his knife. The shark lunged towards him, its massive jaws gaping open, ready to strike. Harvey, undeterred, jabbed at the shark repeatedly, aiming for its sensitive nose. The shark thrashed and writhed, lashing out at Harvey with its razor-sharp teeth. But Harvey was relentless, continuing to stab the shark until it finally succumbed to its injuries and went limp. The crew watched in awe as the once terrifying predator floated lifelessly in the water, defeated by their courage and skill. With the shark no longer a threat, the crew turned their attention to Tony, who was battered and bruised, but alive. They pulled him to safety, relieved and grateful that they had been able to rescue him from the jaws of death. But Harvey and his crew knew their work was not done yet. They needed to understand why this particular shark had been attacking beachgoers, and if it had done so before. With determination in their eyes, the crew hauled the lifeless shark onto the beach, its massive body leaving a trail in the sand. They began to examine the shark, carefully slicing it open to reveal its insides. As they made their way through the layers of skin and muscle, a putrid smell emanated from the belly of the beast. Without warning, a concoction of viscous fluid spilled forth from the shark's stomach, causing the crew to recoil in shock and disgust as the decapitated head of the missing person rolled out into the sand. The realization that the man's body had been consumed by the enormous predator left the crew stunned and appalled. Recognizing the significance of this discovery, the team knew they had to press on with their examination, aware that there could be further clues lurking within the shark's belly. With steady hands and a sense of grim determination, Harvey and his crew continued the examination. They retrieved other body parts of humans from the shark's stomach, confirming their worst fears that this particular shark had been responsible for the recent attacks on beachgoers. As they worked, they couldn't help but feel a sense of grief for the victims and anger towards the shark that had caused so much pain and suffering. But they also knew that they had prevented more attacks and potentially saved countless lives by stopping the shark's reign of terror. Despite the harrowing incident, Tony was able to escape death, although he had lost one of his arms. Harvey and his crew continued their work as shark hunters, but this experience had changed them forever. They knew that they had to respect the power of these creatures and work to protect both humans and sharks alike. It was a lesson they would never forget. Dr. Marie Sanchez was a marine biologist who had devoted her career to studying the behavior of bull sharks. She had spent countless hours diving in the waters off the coast of Florida, observing and documenting the movements and habits of these magnificent creatures. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive nature and their ability to thrive in both saltwater and freshwater environments, making them a particularly fascinating subject for study. Dr. Sanchez had conducted extensive research on the social behavior and movement patterns of bull sharks. She is particularly interested in their migratory patterns and had used sophisticated tracking devices to follow individual sharks as they move between different habitats. Dr. Sanchez is also interested in the feeding habits of bull sharks, which are known to be opportunistic predators, feeding on a wide variety of prey, including fish, turtles, and even other sharks. She has studied the effects of changing ocean temperatures and other environmental factors on the distribution and abundance of prey species, which in turn can impact the behavior of bull sharks. She had received a grant to study the movements and behavior of bull sharks in the Gulf of Mexico and had been meticulously planning her research for months. The Gulf of Mexico was an ideal location for Dr. Sanchez's research, as it was home to a thriving population of bull sharks. She had carefully selected a site for her dive based on her previous observations of shark activity in the area. On the day of her dive, Dr. Sanchez woke up early and prepared her equipment, checking every detail to ensure that everything was in perfect working order. She reviewed her research plan one final time, going over each step in detail to make sure that she had not overlooked anything. As she set out for the dive site, Dr. Sanchez felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. She knew that studying bull sharks could be dangerous, and that even the most experienced researchers could fall victim to a sudden attack. But she was also passionate about her work and believed that the insights she would gain from her research could have a significant impact on our understanding of these fascinating creatures. Once she reached the dive site, Dr. Sanchez wasted no time in getting to work. She carefully donned her wetsuit and diving gear, checking each piece to make sure that it was secure. She then descended into the water, her heart racing with anticipation. For the next few hours, Dr. Sanchez swam through the crystal-clear waters of the Gulf of Mexico, observing and documenting the movements and behavior of the bull sharks she encountered. She used underwater cameras and tracking devices to gather data, carefully noting each observation in her research journal. She was carefully observing a group of bull sharks when she noticed one particular shark, a large female, exhibiting some unusual behavior. The shark seemed agitated and was swimming erratically, darting back and forth with alarming speed. Dr. Sanchez became increasingly concerned as the shark began to circle her movements growing more frenzied by the minute. She realized that the shark had likely been disturbed by her presence and was becoming aggressive. Despite her fear, Dr. Sanchez knew that she needed to remain calm and rational if she was going to survive the encounter. She slowly began to swim away from the shark, maintaining eye contact and making slow, deliberate movements to avoid triggering any sudden attacks. Suddenly, the shark lunged towards Dr. Sanchez, its jaws gaping wide. Instinctively, she rolled onto her back and kicked out with her feet, managing to land a blow on the shark's nose. The impact stunned the shark, and she swam away as fast as she could, trying to put as much distance between herself and the shark as possible. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she glanced back over her shoulder, expecting to see the shark hot on her trail. But to her relief, the shark seemed to have been momentarily stunned by the blow to its nose, and it did not pursue her. Instead, it circled around in the water, as if trying to decide whether or not to make another attack. Dr. Sanchez knew that she could not let her guard down, even for a moment. She stayed vigilant, keeping an eye on the shark's movements as she swam back towards the boat. But just as she was beginning to feel a sense of relief, the shark suddenly lunged towards her once again. This time, Dr. Sanchez did not have the luxury of surprise. She was ready, and she quickly twisted her body to the side, just narrowly avoiding the shark's jaws as they snapped shut in front of her face. She kicked out with her feet, striking the shark's side with all her strength. The impact seemed to stun the shark once again, and it retreated a few feet back, circling around as if weighing its options. Dr. Sanchez knew that she could not keep fending off the shark forever. She needed to make it back to the boat before the shark decided to launch another attack. With adrenaline pumping through her veins, Dr. Sanchez swam as fast as she could, her arms and legs working in perfect synchronization as she propelled herself through the water. The shark pursued her for a few more seconds before finally giving up and disappearing into the depths of the ocean. Dr. Sanchez emerged from the water, gasping for breath, but relieved to have survived the harrowing encounter. She knew that she had narrowly escaped a deadly attack, and she would never forget the lesson she had learned about the power and unpredictability of the creature she studied. The reason for the bull shark's agitation is not immediately clear to Dr. Sanchez, but bull sharks are known for their aggressive nature and unpredictable behavior, and it's possible that the shark was simply reacting to her presence in its territory. However, as Dr. Sanchez later reviewed the footage from her underwater camera, she noticed that the shark had a large fishing hook embedded in its mouth. It was possible that the hook was causing the shark's pain or discomfort, making it more aggressive and unpredictable than usual. Dr. Sanchez knew that the presence of fishing gear and other human activities in the ocean could have a significant impact on the behavior of marine animals. She made a note to investigate further and to share her feelings with local authorities and conservation groups to raise awareness about the need to protect the ocean and its inhabitants. It was a bright and sunny day at the Surf Beach in California, a popular destination for locals and tourists alike. It was a long stretch of golden sand, dotted with brightly colored umbrellas and beach chairs. The water was a vibrant turquoise blue, and the waves were gentle and inviting. There were several volleyball nets set up on the beach, and people could be seen playing games and lounging in the sun. Music played from portable speakers, adding to the festive atmosphere. The beach was flanked by tall cliffs on either side, creating a natural amphitheater that amplified the sounds of the waves and the laughter of the people on the beach. The cliffs were covered in lush green foliage, providing a striking contrast to the golden sand and blue water. At one end of the beach, there was a small harbor where boats could be rented for fishing or sightseeing. At the other end, there was a rocky outcropping that jutted out into the water, providing a popular spot for cliff jumping. There were several amenities on the beach, including restrooms, showers, and a snack bar. Lifeguards were on duty throughout the day, keeping watch over the water and ensuring the safety of the swimmers. A group of teenagers had decided to go for a swim in the ocean because it was a hot summer day and they wanted to cool off in the water. They had spent the morning playing beach volleyball and lounging in the sun, and as the day wore on, the heat became almost unbearable. Among them was 17-year-old Alex, who had always loved the water and was an excellent swimmer. The water looked inviting, and they could see other people swimming and splashing around, so they decided to join in on the fun. They had heard rumors that there were sometimes sharks in the area, but they didn't think much of it. After all, they had been swimming in the ocean before and had never encountered any dangerous predators. As they waded into the water, the teenagers felt the coolness of the ocean wash over them. They laughed and joked, splashing each other and enjoying the freedom of being in the water. They swam out further and further, enjoying the waves and the sun on their skin. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and the water seemed calm and peaceful. Then suddenly, Alex felt a sharp pain in his leg. He looked down to see a massive great white shark, its razor-sharp teeth sinking deep into his flesh. The force of the attack knocked him off his feet, and he struggled to stay afloat as the shark dragged him underwater. The group of teenagers witnessed a horrifying and violent attack as the shark's teeth sank deep into Alex's flesh, causing him to cry out in pain. The other teenagers screamed and tried to swim away, but the shark was too fast. As the shark circled back around for a second attack, its jaws gaped wide open as it prepared to strike again. This time, it bit down hard on Alex's torso, severing his body in two. The teenagers saw the full extent of the damage it had caused as their friend's lifeless body floated to the surface, torn apart and mangled beyond recognition. They watched in horror as the shark continued to thrash around, hungry for more. The other teenagers in the group realized they were in danger and quickly began to swim away as fast as they could. The water around them was turned up, making it difficult to see where the shark was, but they knew they had to get as far away as possible. As they swam, the teenagers could hear the shark's powerful thrashing in the water behind them, which only spurred them to swim faster. They knew they couldn't outrun the shark, but they hoped to create enough distance between themselves and the shark to give them a chance to reach the shore. Despite the terror and panic they felt, the teenagers remained focused on swimming and tried not to let their fear get the best of them. They swam in a zigzag pattern, hoping to make it harder for the shark to follow them. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the group reached the shore. They staggered out of the water, panting and trembling with fear, but relieved to have escaped with their lives. They looked out at the water, watching as the shark continued to thrash around, its massive body visible in the churning waves. The attack of the great white shark sent shock waves through the beach, and people quickly realized that they were in danger. As the other teenagers in the water tried to swim away, people on the shore began to scream and shout, urging them to come back to the beach. The beach quickly became a scene of chaos as people scrambled to get out of the water and call for help. As news of the attack spread, more and more people on the beach began to panic. Parents gathered their children and ran for safety, while others called for help and tried to get as far away from the water as possible. Emergency services arrived on the scene quickly, including ambulances, police, and rescue teams. They quickly assessed the situation and began to take action to control the situation and help the victims. Lifeguards were the first to respond, jumping into the water to try to reach Alex and the other teenagers who had been swimming with him. They could see the water turning red with blood, and they knew they were dealing with a serious situation. Paramedics and ambulance crews arrived next, and they immediately began to tend to Alex. Despite their best efforts, however, they could not save him, as he had been bitten in half by the shark. The police arrived on the scene soon after, and they began to cordon off the area, preventing people from getting too close to the water. They also searched the surrounding area for any signs of the great white shark, hoping to capture or kill it before it could attack anyone else. Meanwhile, rescue helicopters circled overhead, searching the water for any signs of the shark. They used thermal imaging cameras to try to detect the shark's body heat, but they were unable to locate it. As news of the attack spread, more and more emergency services arrived on the scene, including Marine Patrol units and Coast Guard vessels. They scoured the water for any signs of the shark. The beach became crowded with onlookers, and many people were outraged that such a dangerous predator could be lurking so close to shore, and called for increased measures to control shark populations. For the family and friends of Alex, there was no comfort to be found in the aftermath of the attack. They were left to grieve the loss of a young life cut tragically short, and to wonder how something so horrific could happen to someone so innocent. The memory of that day would haunt them forever, a reminder of the brutal and unpredictable nature of the world we live in. In the heart of a bustling city, there stood a massive aquarium housing all kinds of aquatic life, including the crown jewel of the establishment, a majestic great white shark. Visitors from far and wide flocked to the aquarium to catch a glimpse of the magnificent creature, basking in the glory of the glass tank that contained it. The great white, affectionately nicknamed Mighty, had been the star attraction of the aquarium for years, delighting audiences with its graceful movements and fearsome presence. It had been carefully trained by the aquarium staff to perform tricks and interact with visitors, becoming somewhat of a local celebrity. But on one fateful day, something went terribly wrong. The shark, without warning or provocation, began to thrash about wildly in its tank, smashing into the walls and causing a panic among the visitors. The aquarium staff sprang into action, desperately trying to calm the beast and prevent any harm from coming to the visitors. The cause of the shark's sudden outburst remained a mystery, but many speculated it was due to stress or agitation from being cooped up in the small tank for so long. Regardless of the cause, the situation quickly spiraled out of control, with the shark becoming increasingly violent and aggressive. As the chaos ensued, the staff quickly ushered the terrified visitors to safety, but it soon became clear that the shark was beyond their control. Despite their best efforts, the animal continued to lash out, wreaking havoc in its surroundings and causing damage to the aquarium. The situation quickly became a matter of public concern, with news of the rogue shark spreading like wildfire. The authorities were called in to assist with the situation, but their efforts were met with limited success. The shark proved to be a formidable foe, defying all attempts to subdue it and wreaking havoc wherever it went. As the hours turned into days, the shark's rampage continued, and the city was brought to a standstill. The aquarium, once a source of wonder and amazement, had become a site of terror and chaos, and the great white at the center of it all. Despite their best efforts, the aquarium staff were unable to calm the shark, and it seemed that the situation was destined to end in tragedy. But then, a glimmer of hope emerged, an unlikely hero who would prove to be the key to resolving the crisis. Enter Tony, a marine biologist who had devoted his life to the study of sharks. Tony had been following the news of the shark's rampage with great interest and had a hunch that he might be able to help. Armed with his knowledge of shark behavior and an unshakable determination, he set out to the aquarium to take on the mighty beast. It was a risky move, but Tony was determined to try. Armed with only a wetsuit and a diving tank, he plunged into the tank to face the shark head-on. The shark, sensing a new challenger, turned its attention to Tony, preparing to strike. But Tony was ready. He knew that the key to calming the shark was to establish a connection with it, to show it that he was not a threat, but a fellow inhabitant of the ocean. With nerves of steel, he approached the shark, speaking to it in a calm, soothing voice. At first, the shark remained agitated, but slowly it began to respond to Tony's presence. As the minutes ticked by, the shark's movements became less frenzied, and it began to calm down, allowing Tony to approach it without fear of attack. And then, in a moment of pure magic, the shark and Tony connected. It was as though they were communicating on a level beyond words, with an unspoken understanding passing between them. The shark, which had been so aggressive and violent just moments before, now lay motionless as Tony gently stroked its fin. The crowd watching from outside the tank was silent, holding their breath as they watched the unlikely bond unfold before them. It was as though the shark had found a friend in Tony, someone who understood it and respected its power. After what felt like an eternity, Tony slowly made his way back to the edge of the tank, the shark following him closely. With a final pat on its fin, Tony climbed out of the water, his heart pounding with excitement and relief. The aquarium staff rushed to the tank, stunned at what they had just witnessed. The shark, which had been so out of control just moments before, now seemed perfectly calm and content, its aggression replaced with a newfound sense of peace. Over the following weeks, the aquarium staff worked with Tony to create a more natural and spacious environment for the great white, one that would better suit its needs and provide it with the space it required. The shark thrived in its new home, interacting with visitors in a more natural and respectful way. In the end, the story of the shark in the aquarium gone berserk became a lesson for all, a reminder that even the most fearsome and powerful creatures can be tamed with a little understanding and respect. And for Tony, it was a moment that he would never forget, a triumph that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As he walked away from the aquarium that day, his heart filled with gratitude and awe. He couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the ocean held, and what other marvels he might discover in his lifelong quest to understand the mysteries of the deep. Australia has some of the most beautiful and diverse wildlife in the world. From the smallest critters that can kill you with a single touch, to massive beasts that dominate the ocean. Sharks are commonplace in Australia, and notorious for being extremely aggressive when provoked, something that Felix Marsh would come to find out during a scuba dive west of Perth in 2010. Faulty instruction and poor judgment would change Felix's life forever as he came face to face with the power of a massive great white shark. Felix was a Perth resident and spent a great deal of his life in the water, surfing in his free time when not at his job as a construction worker. However, one day, one of his friends came to him with the proposition of taking a scuba diving class, where an instructor would show them the ropes, and they would be able to check out some of the coral life near the shoreline and see what sorts of fish roam around it. Felix was quick to accept the proposition, and they set up their dive to be in the following week. He managed to snag some free time from work, so everything was going according to plan. On the day of their scheduled dive, Felix and his friend Jan went to the beach before everyone else, and they were both comfortable with surfing on the surface of the water, but not so much being under it. There was no one at the meeting place for the dive, but people started eventually showing up, and they seemed just as nervous as Felix and Jan. They made their acquaintance, and they all remarked how they felt safer knowing that more people were supposed to join them on the dive. All in all, there were 5 of them there, waiting on the instructor. The instructor arrived eventually, but he was 20 minutes late. He blamed his tardiness on traffic and a hangover, which set the group on edge. However, he had a friendly outlook and seemed confident, so the group went along with it. They boarded a small boat stocked with the necessary gear for a scuba dive and went out a few hundred yards from the shore. This was a rookie dive, so the instructor only wanted to show them the basics and some of the underwater flora and fauna through a quick dive. After a rather tedious but detailed instruction on how the scuba gear is supposed to work and how they had to behave in the water, some basic communication signals, and more. Before long, the 6 of them took their positions on each side of the boat and flung themselves back into the water. Felix remembered that the initial shock of the cold water was disorienting at the start, but he was quick to get acclimated and was gliding through the water in no time. He was struck by the immediate beauty of the corals below them and the, at a glance, millions of fish swimming around them. At the instructor's command, they commenced the descent lower, so they could see the reef more clearly. Felix and Jan were entranced by the fish and the vivid beauty of the reef, but they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. In truth, they were fine as the instructor had years of experience under his belt. The group continued descending until they were a few yards from the reef itself. The instructor told them that they were not to touch anything on the reef, as it was a single massive organism, and it mustn't be disturbed. The group was okay with that, so they circled the reef and took in the sights. After a few minutes, Felix felt a strong grip on his shoulder and turned to see Jan with a terrified expression on his face, pointing beyond the reef. The pair went to investigate, only to find that the reef was being stalked by a massive great white shark. Jan later reported that the beast must have been around 20 feet, which is the maximum length a great white can reach. They immediately backed up and went to tell the instructor, who pointed for them to surface. After they breached the surface, a few of the divers immediately panicked and started swimming towards the boat, but the instructor stopped them and said there was nothing to worry about. As long as they didn't disturb the shark, they were fine. Felix and Jan were calmed by this information, but the rest of the group did not feel comfortable remaining in the water, much less after the guide suggested that they swim to the shark to interact with it. Felix, Jan, and the instructor went for another dive while the rest of the group went to the boat, and with each passing second, the pair became more paranoid that the shark would attack them. But they figured that the experience would be worth the risk. As they approached the shark, Felix thought about how dead its black eyes looked, but they didn't seem threatening. They got close to it at the instructor's command and touched the shark, amazed at how rough the surface of its skin felt, even through the mesh of the wetsuit. It was covered in scars, most likely from previous battles for dominance with other sharks. The shark circled them a few times, and it seemed to be minding its own business. However, things changed when they noticed that it started getting uncomfortably close to Jan, which Felix signaled to the instructor, but he didn't respond. This irritated Felix, who quickly swam up to Jan and pulled him away. This caught the shark's attention. As though a switch flipped, the shark suddenly twisted in its trajectory and made a beeline toward Felix, sinking its teeth into his arm and flailing wildly, seemingly trying to rip it off. Felix's respirator immediately fell out of his mouth as he let out a scream that was muted by the water around him. The instructor and Jan immediately swam up to attempt to free Felix, but the shark was simply too strong. Before they knew it, the water was red with Felix's blood, and they could barely see anything. Jan, who was holding on to Felix, felt his friend float into his arms as the shark shot away from them with a trophy in its mouth. Felix was unconscious by this point and losing a tremendous amount of blood, so Jan immediately started swimming up, clutching his friend by his side, with the instructor following close. When they breached the surface, the rest of the group on the boat was waiting with bated breath, as they didn't know what else to do. But two of them rushed to pull Felix out of the water. They managed to get him on the deck of the ship, and one of the divers went to get some cloth from her bag to tie off Felix's mangled arm. It was completely torn off at the elbow, with visible bone and sinew sticking out. Jan later remarked that it was no wonder that he passed out from the pain, as the injury was so horrific. The instructor rushed to the wheel of the boat and sped them towards the shore, alerting the Coast Guard about the situation, so there was an ambulance ready for them when they arrived. Jan stayed with Felix the entire trip back, which took less than 10 minutes, as it was a rookie dive. When they arrived at the shore, an ambulance was waiting for them, along with a crowd of people curious about its purpose there. The paramedics ran to the boat and rushed Felix to the ambulance, which took him and Jan to the nearest hospital. Felix had lost a nearly fatal amount of blood, so his heart rate lowered, and they barely managed to keep him alive on the way to the ER. He was admitted and had to stay in the ICU for a prolonged period, while his blood levels stabilized and the doctors had a chance to treat his arm. It was a clean break at the elbow, but the skin around it was shredded by the shark's teeth, resulting in nerve damage and loss of function up to Felix's elbow. He did manage to make a full recovery, however, but the trauma of the incident left him with PTSD and a strong fear of the ocean, thalassophobia. He never went into the ocean again, and the only bright spot of the incident was that Felix and Jan's friendship only deepened. The reason the instructor did not act in time was that he was holding his eyes shut through a migraine brought about by his hangover. The diving company fired the instructor and offered compensation for Felix's treatment. As the sun rose over the pristine waters of the Great Barrier Reef, Harvey woke up in his small cabin on board the dive boat. He was excited to begin another day of diving and exploring the wonders of the reef. After a quick breakfast, Harvey joined his fellow divers on the deck to gear up for the first dive. The crew helped him check their equipment, including the scuba tanks, weight belts, and wetsuits. Once everything was set, Harvey and the other divers donned their masks and fins and plunged into the crystal-clear water. As he descended, Harvey felt the cool water envelop him. He gazed around him, marveling at the colorful corals and the schools of tropical fish that darted past him. He spotted a giant manta ray gliding gracefully overhead, and he felt a rush of excitement and awe. For the next hour, Harvey and his dive buddies explored the reef, taking in the breathtaking beauty of this underwater paradise. They spotted a sea turtle lazily swimming by, and Harvey snapped some photos with his underwater camera. He also saw a small octopus hiding in a crevice and a bright orange starfish clinging to a rock. As they ascended back to the surface, Harvey felt a sense of exhilaration and joy. He couldn't wait for the next dive, which was scheduled for later that morning. After a brief break, Harvey and the others geared up again and headed back into the water. This time, they were on a mission to locate a sunken shipwreck that was rumored to be in the area. Using their compasses and underwater maps, they navigated through the reef until they reached the spot where the wreck was supposed to be. At first, they saw nothing but sand and coral, but suddenly, Harvey spotted a dark shape looming in the distance. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed a shipwreck covered in barnacles and surrounded by schools of fish. They swam around the wreck, exploring its nooks and crannies and taking more photos. Harvey was thrilled to have discovered such an amazing sight, and he felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. After the second dive, Harvey and the others returned to the dive boat, tired but happy. They chatted about their experiences and shared their photos, swapping stories and tips. Harvey couldn't believe how lucky he was to have such an incredible job, exploring one of the most beautiful places on Earth. As the sun set over the reef, Harvey settled into his cabin, ready for a good night's sleep. He knew that tomorrow would bring more adventures and more discoveries, and he couldn't wait to see what the reef had in store for him next. Harvey had always been fascinated by shipwrecks, and after yesterday's dive where they discovered one in the Great Barrier Reef, he knew he had to return for a closer look. He planned his dive carefully, ensuring he had all the necessary gear, and set out early in the morning together with his fellow divers. As they approached the shipwreck, he noticed something moving in the distance. At first, he assumed it was just a school of fish, but as he got closer, he realized it was something much bigger. A great white shark. Harvey's heart began to race with excitement and apprehension. He had never encountered great white sharks up close before, and he knew that one wrong move could mean disaster. As Harvey entered the water, he was immediately struck by the sheer size and power of the great white sharks. They glided through the water with an effortless grace, their razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Despite their fearsome reputation, Harvey felt a deep respect and awe for these magnificent creatures. He moved slowly and deliberately, keeping a safe distance while carefully tagging each one with a small device. As the day wore on, Harvey's initial apprehension began to give way to a sense of wonder and exhilaration. He was witnessing one of nature's most incredible spectacles, and he knew that he was privileged to be a part of it. Harvey watched a massive shark circling around the shipwreck. He knew that great whites were common in the area, but he had never encountered one up close before. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if they should abandon the dive, but his curiosity got the better of him, and he convinced the others to press on. They approached the wreck slowly and carefully, keeping a close eye on the shark. As they got closer, Harvey realized that the wreck was home to a whole ecosystem of marine life. Schools of fish swam in and out of the nooks and crannies, and he saw lobsters and crabs scurrying along the ocean floor. He also noticed that the great white shark seemed to be hunting around the wreck, using it as a source of food. Harvey watched in amazement as the shark darted in and out of the shadows, searching for prey. For a few minutes, Harvey forgot his fear and was completely absorbed in the underwater world around him. He was so engrossed in his observations when he felt something shift in his backpack. He tried to adjust it, but in doing so, he accidentally kicked a small rock that had been resting on the ocean floor. The sound of the rock hitting the shipwreck echoed through the water, and suddenly, Harvey heard a loud thrashing sound. He looked around and saw a massive shark heading straight for him. Harvey knew that he had made a mistake. He had accidentally disturbed the shark's peaceful existence and now put himself in grave danger. He tried to swim away as fast as he could, but the shark was too fast. It closed in on him, and Harvey could see its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. The group was horrified as they watched the shark relentlessly attack Harvey, its jaws clamped tightly around his shoulder. Without wasting a second, the group of divers sprang into action. They formed a human chain, trying to distract the shark and draw its attention away from Harvey. Some of them even swam towards the shark and tried to hit it with their diving gear. Another diver signaled for the group to surface and call for help, hoping that a nearby boat or rescue team could come to their aid. However, the shark was too strong and too determined to let go of its prey. It thrashed around violently, causing chaos in the water. The shark was relentless, and it took all of the divers' courage and strength to keep it at bay. They were finally able to pry Harvey free from the shark's jaws, but unfortunately, it was too late. The force of the shark's bite had already decapitated Harvey. Despite the divers' valiant efforts, they were unable to save Harvey from the shark's jaws. As the reality of the situation set in, the divers were left feeling helpless and devastated. They had lost a member of their group, a friend, and a fellow adventurer. They felt a deep sense of grief and sorrow. They knew that the memory of that terrifying encounter with the shark would stay with them forever. They were shocked by the suddenness and violence of the attack, as well as by the realization of how short life was. The sight of their friend being attacked by the shark was something that would haunt them for a long time to come. In the aftermath of the attack, the group was left with a renewed respect for the power and unpredictability of nature, as well as a greater appreciation for the fragility of life. They knew that they had been lucky to escape with their lives, and that they would need to be even more careful and vigilant in the future. Since he was a child, Anthony was captivated by the ocean's mesmerizing beauty and its fascinating inhabitants. Growing up, he dreamed of exploring the depths of the sea and discovering new species of marine life. As an avid scuba diver, he had traveled to many breathtaking locations across the globe, but the Bahamas spelled a special allure that always drew him back. The waters of the Bahamas were like a shimmering jewel, clear and inviting him to dive in and explore. Anthony was mesmerized by the vibrant coral reefs that burst with colors and the schools of exotic fish that swam in synchronized motion. He had seen enormous manta rays with wingspans that seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see, and gentle nurse sharks gliding through the water with effortless grace. With each dive, Anthony felt he was entering a magical realm where he could escape the noise and chaos of the world above and immerse himself in a world of quiet wonder. The ocean floor was like an otherworldly landscape, dotted with bizarre rock formations and coral towers that rose like spires towards the surface. Anthony felt like he was living in a dream as he swam through the crystal-clear waters, taking in the stunning beauty of the ocean's depths. On a balmy day, the adventurous Anthony decided to embark on a journey to a secluded area of the island that he had never set foot on before. After renting scuba diving equipment, he dove into the emerald green waters that glistened under the sun's rays. As he descended, he felt the cool water engulf him, and he was immediately greeted by a school of tropical fish that swam playfully around him. Anthony was thrilled to explore this new world that lay beneath the surface, and he couldn't wait to discover the hidden gems that awaited him in this remote part of the island. The sunlit water was teeming with a kaleidoscope of vibrant sea creatures, all going about their business. Anthony was in awe of the ever-changing underwater scenery. He watched schools of neon-colored fish darting through the coral, while iridescent jellyfish drifted like slow-moving fireworks. Suddenly, a sinister silhouette appeared, a looming figure in the distance that sent chills down his spine. As the creature approached, he could see the distinctive stripes of the massive predator. It's a 14-foot-long tiger shark, and its eyes were fixed on Anthony. As Anthony gazed into the soulless eyes of the tiger shark, his heart pounded with fear. He felt the cold, inquisitive stare of the shark that had just appeared out of nowhere. Its powerful jaws moved with fluid grace as it circled him, a silent predator in search of its next meal. Anthony's mind raced as he realized the danger he was in. He tried to swim away, but the shark was too quick. Suddenly, the shark lunged forward and clamped its jaws around his leg. Anthony felt a searing pain and was dragged down into the depths of the ocean, struggling to break free. Despite the agonizing pain, Anthony refused to surrender to the jaws of the beast. He wielded his diving knife, lashing out with all his might, but it was futile. The shark's scales were impenetrable to the flimsy blade. With each chomp, the predator's serrated teeth tore through Anthony's flesh, causing him to scream in agony. As time passed, Anthony's strength waned, and the water around him grew crimson with his blood. He struggled to stay conscious as the predator continued to circle, its eyes fixated on its prey. Anthony knew that he needed to act fast before the shark launched its final attack, but with his limbs growing weaker by the second, it seemed that his fate was sealed. In his last-ditch effort to save himself, Anthony made a desperate move to reach the nearby rock formation. As he got closer, he saw the jagged edges of the rocks, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. But his hope was short-lived. The tiger shark quickly caught up to him, circling and thrashing in the water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With all his might, Anthony plunged his diving knife into the shark's eye, and the beast writhed in agony, releasing its grip on him. With a gasp of air, Anthony broke through the surface of the water, but the struggle was far from over. He floated in the open water, desperately trying to signal for help, but no one came. The pain in his leg was agonizing, and he could feel himself slipping away, growing weaker by the second. The sun beat down mercilessly on him, and the salt water burned his wounds, adding to the agony. As time ticked by, his strength waned, and his head grew heavy. Anthony knew that he was fighting a losing battle, and as the sun began to set, he prayed for a miracle. And then, with a final burst of energy, Anthony saw a boat in the distance. He waved his arms frantically, hoping that someone would see him, and they did. The boat raced towards him, and Anthony felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was going to make it after all. But it was not to be. As the boat drew closer, Anthony felt his body begin to shut down. He could feel his heart slowing down and his breath becoming shallower. He knew that he was dying. Anthony never made it to the hospital. His tragic story spread quickly throughout the local news, sending a shiver down the spines of all of those who had ever considered taking a dip in the ocean. It was a haunting reminder that despite the stunning beauty of the Bahamian waters, danger lurked beneath the surface. The unpredictable nature of wild animals was a force to be reckoned with, and even the most experienced divers were not immune to their attacks. Anthony's legacy would be one of caution and respect for the powerful creatures that call the ocean their home.